Hi everyone, this is the Good Girl Confessional podcast and I'm your host Sandy Lowries. Today in the confessional, I wanted to ask you, do you believe in ghosts? Or have you ever heard or seen anything ethereal you couldn't quite explain? If you love all things that go bump in the night, this might just be the podcast for you, because today in the confessional, I'm chatting with Kristy Sumner, one of the founding members with the Soul Sisters Paranormal Investigation team. In 2014, investigator Kristy, along with 3 other women, started Soul Sisters Paranormal, an all-female paranormal investigation team focusing on some of the most haunted sites across America. In 2020, the team changed a little bit, with twin sisters Jenny and Kristy becoming the primary investigators for the team. Both Jenny and Kristy have always had a fascination with the paranormal, and small impromptu investigations occurred even before the formal organisation of the team. And while based mostly in Florida, the sisters have travelled across the country of the USA in order to investigate interesting locations. Both Jenny and Kristy are accomplished professionals in their respective fields, and each holds an advanced PhD, which means they come from this with a scientific lens. Paranormal investigation and education are just part of the services they provide. They're passionate about treating each investigation location with respect and the reverence that it deserves for its place in history. Welcome, Kristy Sumner. Hello and welcome to the confessional, Kristy Sumner. How are you?
I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today because your story or this organization is kind of extraordinary. Wow. How on earth did you get into? No, before we even do that, let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
Tell us all about Soul Sisters Paranormal Investigations.
Okay, so we're Soul Sisters Paranormal, and what we are is an all-female paranormal investigation group, and we travel across the United States looking for historical locations that also have a paranormal reputation, hauntings, if you will. And so we document these locations. We give a historical narrative and a historical background of those locations, and then we do a paranormal investigation, and we put anything that we find that we cannot explain into essentially documentary videos about the location, the historical aspect of it, as well as the paranormal aspect.
Wow. And so you've come together, you're friends and sisters, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. So the original group is myself, my twin sister, our younger sister, and then 2 female family friends. In 2020, earlier this year, we kind of decided we're going to morph a little bit, and it's really going to be led by my twin sister and I, just because of family things and everything else that's going on here in 2020. So the last few investigations have just been my twin and I, but we're, like I said, we're an all-female group, and it's just been a fascinating ride so far.
I absolutely love that. And I love that you're twin sisters who are really into paranormal activity. And like, I just loved the whole idea that you, as a team, you're an entire female team of
Yes, ma'am.
paranormal investigators, which I don't think I have seen anywhere else ever.
Well, there are a few in the States, or there's subsections of teams that will go off and just do a paranormal investigation as all females. But we do find that we're a little bit unique in the paranormal community, not only from the female aspect, but also because we all have advanced degrees. So I myself have a PhD, my twin has a PhD, our younger sister has a JD, and then we have another JD and a master's holder on the team. So what we do is we really come at it from a research-based perspective, a very academic-based perspective as well. And I think that adds a little bit more credence to what we do, if that makes sense. Not to disparage any other paranormal investigation team that's out there, but because we come at it from a research-based perspective, we also do a lot of what we call debunking. So if we find something that we can explain as another factor, i.e. wind or light pollution or something like that, then we rule out anything paranormal, obviously. And so because we do that, I think that sets us apart a little bit from other teams in the community.
Oh, absolutely. And I really love to, so I can kind of fall down a rabbit hole watching your videos because they're fantastic. But
Thank you.
what I really liked, exactly as you were saying, was this historical narrative that comes into it as well. And that I
Mhm.
was learning so much about the places that you were visiting, which is really fantastic. So it wasn't just, let's walk in and find out if there's anything happening here. It's a whole backstory as well, which is really fantastic, educational, fun.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that and for watching our videos. And that's really what we want to do. The historical aspect of these locations that we go to is really the driving factor behind what we do. The paranormal is actually secondary. So if we can highlight these locations and give people facts or some information that they might not know about that they themselves want to visit it, we feel that that's our job, to maybe help preserve it in some way, with tourism dollars or something like that. But the historical narrative is what really drives us to these locations.
It's fantastic. And so on that, so what you're talking about, coming from investigating from a research sort of perspective, how does one measure whether or not there's any sort of paranormal activity?
Well, to your point, what we do first is we will go to a location and we will spend the day there before we have our investigation. So we will we'll do a day tour. We'll look at different things that we feel could influence our investigation. So we take notes on, like I said, air pollution, light pollution. Is there any airplane traffic? Is there a train track nearby? Are there cars that are going to be going by through the night? Street lights, anything like that that could influence our findings during the investigation. So we take very copious notes on that aspect. And then when we go into the investigation, the night of the investigation, we'll set up night vision video cameras, we'll set up audio voice recorders, and we will go in and conduct a very thorough investigation with that equipment as well as some electrical equipment that is designed to measure energy. So for example, we have what we call K2 meters, and these were actually designed for electricians to find power sources in a wall, or any electromagnetic energy sources in a location. So when we go into, say, an abandoned prison and we know that there's absolutely no power to that location and we have these meters going off, that to us is extremely compelling. And so we'll rely on those pieces of information, coming from those meters, but also from what we see and hear on our voice recorders and our video cameras. So we'll set up things that will remain stationary during the night, during the entire investigation. And then we'll go back and listen and watch all of that footage that we captured to see if we can find things that are unexplained.
Wow. Like on that point, when you said that, an abandoned prison,
Mhm.
um, you girls must have absolute nerves of steel because I can't believe that you walk into these places. Sometimes you're there at night
Yes, ma'am.
or overnight, and there's things happening, and there's often, as you say, it's dark. And I mean, are you ever terrified?
Not so much terrified, because when we walk into these locations, it is that sense of exploration for us. So it's more of an adrenaline factor. If we hear a noise or we hear footsteps that we can't explain, we actually run to it. We have had moments where we've been absolutely startled. For example, when you're standing in Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary and you're the only people there, and you hear a door slam down a cell block, that's startling. But we'll actually run towards it to see if we can figure out why it closed or start asking questions in the area to see if we can get some type of audible response to go with that door slam. So for us, once you get into the location, it's fun. It really is for us because we go into it trying to find those answers.
I think that's incredible. You've got more nerve than me, that's for sure.
You know,
So,
I always, I always, I always say I'm more scared of the living than I am the dead, honestly.
which is a good point, right? So that what is I guess the most interesting or frightening or kind of place that you have been in that really sticks in your memory?
Well, all of the locations that we've gone to have all been unique for that historical perspective. For us to go into these locations and have a very tactile experience with the history of that location, to us, it's just the culmination of what we do. So when we can go into, say, Fort Mifflin, which is a Revolutionary War fort, and you've got your hands on the brick that were laid by Revolutionary War soldiers, that's pretty incredible to us. So for the historical factor, I would say that Fort Mifflin, which is in Philadelphia, was an amazing location for us to explore. As far as the location that had the most paranormal evidence, I would say that the old Gilchrist County Jail, which is in Trenton, Florida, which is about an hour's west of Gainesville, Florida, that to me was probably the most active. It's a very small jail. It was built in 1928 and it was in operation until 1968. And it has 4 cells on the first floor and then 4 cells on the second floor. And then there's a small jailer's house that was connected via a doorway. And so after 1968, when it closed, it sat abandoned for decades, and people would use it as a drug hangout. They'd go in and do drug deals and stuff there. So it's not in the best of locations. So we went into this location to investigate it. And the first time I was there, I was with Miranda from Ghost Biker Explorations. She's a colleague in the field, and she and I were the only 2 people on the property. And we were getting things that we could not explain. We were seeing shadow figures in the moment. We were hearing men's voices when we know that there's no men on the property. All of our equipment was going off and giving us different indications that things were there that we couldn't explain. And so I would say, if I could call it a perfect paranormal investigation, I think that's what it would be, because everything that we had that night, every piece of equipment was validating every other piece of equipment. And it was just an amazing location for us. So as far as paranormal activity, I'd say that was my best investigation.
Wow. And I know that you are one of the very few teams that has been able to go into Ma Baker's house
Yes, ma'am.
and check for paranormal activity. So how was that experience for you?
It was fantastic. The Bont Barker house, it actually sits about 6 miles from where my Nana and Granddaddy used to live. So when we would visit Nana and Granddaddy, we would go past the location sometimes when we were going into town, and they would say, that was where Ma Barker and her son Fred were killed. And so for just a little bit of a backstory, in 1935, that's when the shootout happened. So the Barker gang was very prolific in the 1920s and into the 1930s. And they would go across the country robbing banks, and then they escalated into kidnapping. So by that time, after they went into kidnapping and they got all this ransom money for those kidnappings, the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover really decided to track down this gang and stop them from what they were doing. So the gang split up, and Ma, who was the matriarch of the group, and one of her sons, Freddie, went down to a little town called Ocklawaha, Florida, and they rented this house under the name of Blackburn. That was their alias. And so they thought that they could escape the FBI from by going to that location. So on January 16th, 1935, J. Edgar Hoover and some of his men tracked them down to that location, and a gun battle ensued. And it lasted about 4.5 hours, and Ma and Fred were killed in that gun battle. So the house that they were killed in, it remained in the family of the guy who built it. And in 2016, the county that we live in, Marion County, actually purchased the house. So when they purchased it, I asked if I could be the first paranormal investigation group to go in and do an actual professional paranormal investigation of the location, and they agreed. So where the house sits now, there's no power to it. There's no water to it. It sits on about 40 acres, undisturbed by itself. And so I knew I had complete control of the environment of that location. And we set up some amazing paranormal equipment in there. We had some night vision video cameras. We had voice recorders going. We had things that were set to alarm if it senses any energy. So when there's no power in the house and it starts to alarm, that's very compelling for us. So we were capturing things that I could not explain because I knew I had control of the environment. We were capturing things on our night vision video cameras. We had some light anomalies that I could not explain, and then we were capturing voices all throughout the night. So that to me was probably one of our better investigations, and we've been the only team so far allowed to do an investigation like that.
Wow, that must have been so exciting.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, wow. And so what led you down that path? Like, what was it that you just that kind of triggered this, I really want to be a paranormal investigator? Or did it just evolve from something else? Or
Well, it actually evolved from a girls' trip. So my sisters and I, we live in different parts of the country, and so every year we would take a couple of girls' trips, meet up in different locations, and just do something fun for the weekend, so we could just all be together for the weekend. And so we had a friend of our family who sat on the board of the Moundsville State Penitentiary in Moundsville, West Virginia, which is one of the most haunted locations in the country. And so he said, I know you guys are taking a girls' trip this year. Why don't you come up to Moundsville and spend the night in the penitentiary and see if you can find anything? And so we always said if we had the chance to go on a paranormal investigation, we would jump on that. So we decided, let's go. And we stayed the night in the Moundsville State Penitentiary. We had a couple of night vision video cameras. We had a couple of voice recorders and some digital cameras. And that experience just was amazing for us because we were capturing door slams. We heard footsteps coming out of the darkness at us. And so we left that experience saying, we want to do this. We want to go around the country and see if we can find other paranormal evidence that is just compelling for us. So we decided to formalize our team. We came up with our team name. We had our logo created, our theme music created. And because we really felt that if we were going to do this, we wanted to bring a sense of professionalism to a community that's really seen as a subculture by the mainstream. And so if we felt that if we could elevate it somewhat and really come at this as a professional standpoint, from a professional standpoint, that's what we wanted to do. And again, driven by that historical aspect of what we do, and then coupling that with the paranormal, it's just something that has really just culminated in this amazing team and allowed us to go on some very cool investigations.
it is so cool. My girls' trips tend to involve cocktails at a bar, but yours involves slamming doors and spirits and voices.
Exactly.
So I think I'd be outside shivering in the night. So, so have you got some places that you'd really, really love to go and investigate that you haven't been able to as yet?
We do have a very extensive bucket list. Right now, we're trying to go international. We wanted to go over to Ireland this year, but obviously things as they were. So we're trying to get over there next year. There's a place called Leap Castle that would be an amazing location to investigate. And some of the older castles over there in England and Ireland is definitely on our bucket list. We'd like to get back to Australia. I've been there just as a tourist, but not as a paranormal investigator. So I'd love to get back down to Australia. In the States, the Queen Mary out in California is definitely on our bucket list, as well as those little local haunts that people talk about. Aside from what I call the larger commercial locations, just finding those smaller town legends and lore is also something that we're very interested in. So we can pretty much go anywhere and find a story and really do an amazing video and investigation on those stories.
I'll be really excited if you come to Australia. If you do, we'll have to catch up. That'd be great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely love that.
And
So yeah, we do have an extensive bucket list.
and we definitely have a number of places that are said to be quite haunted here in Australia.
Mhm.
Obviously, we a lot of convicts and a lot of convict kind of stations from when the country was first colonized by white settlers. But really, kind of some fascinating places here, I'm sure.
Yes, ma'am.
So with you, you recently, I recently watched a video. You were at the Grand Old Lady.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I think the Grand Old Lady has really become one of our favorite locations. We were able to investigate that in May of this year. And it was just a very neat experience for us because, first of all, it was just myself and my twin sister representing Soul Sisters Paranormal. And then again, Miranda from Ghost Biker Explorations. So we were the only three people in this entire building. And it's a 3-story building. It was built in 1905 when the railroad came through this small town in North Carolina, and it really catered to those that wanted to get away from the city life. So it had these grand rooms. There's hardwood floors throughout. It started started out with 107 guest rooms, and through the years that has transitioned to about 50 guest rooms as those smaller rooms were converted into larger rooms. And it just has an amazing history, again, catering to travelers, but it also served as a clinic for smallpox at one point, and it was a private residence at one point. So it just has this really cool historical story. And then when you walk into it now, it's back to being operational as a hotel. But during the off season, they will allow paranormal investigators to go in and investigate. So when you go in now, you just have this sense of stepping back into time, right? So stepping back into like 1905, there's no televisions on the property. There's no phones on the property. It really is just this immersion into the past. And so we did that investigation. Miranda investigated on the first night. And so she and I were the only two there. And she had such an amazing investigation that Jenny and I were so excited for the Saturday night investigation. So when Jenny and I investigated, we were audibly hearing voices, male voices. We were audibly hearing door slams in the moment. There's at one point where Jenny and I were up on the third floor and Miranda was down on the first floor in one of the rooms that we had set up as a base camp. And we heard this tremendous crash from the floor underneath us. And we thought Miranda had knocked something over, and she thought that we had knocked something over. And upon investigating, we found a table that had been overturned, which was not overturned when we were there during the day. So that was amazing for us. And then we actually slept there. So when we were sleeping, there was the second night we were sleeping, there was a suite. So Miranda was in a bed kind of in this outer room of the suite. And then Jenny and I were in a king bed in the second room. And we had said goodnight. And about 15 minutes after we said goodnight, there was a very audible male's voice right outside the bedroom door saying, "Please don't go." And that was probably one of the best voices that we've captured in our paranormal investigations. So the grand old lady, for us, it was just a sense of, again, stepping back into history, but the spirits that are there to us really wanted their story told. They wanted to know that we were there. We never felt anything malicious. We never felt anything negative. It was just more of a welcoming, like, we acknowledge that you're here and we want to communicate with you type of a situation. And I'm very excited to get back to that location just because of the paranormal evidence we were able to capture.
It was really fascinating to watch, and I
Oh,
really
thank you.
like that is the location where they actually put up the welcome signs over the doors
Yes, ma'am.
basically to welcome the ghosts, I guess, or the ghosts of the past. And I really loved that. I thought it was fantastic.
Yes, ma'am. They really do. The current owner really embraces the spirit activity. You know, when she first bought the property, she did not believe in ghosts. She did not believe in the paranormal. And then things started happening. She started hearing voices. She started hearing the door knocks and such. And she said, if they're here, they're welcome to be here. And so she started putting up welcome signs in rooms where she knew that paranormal activity existed. And it just really is the most welcoming place that we've been, both for the spirits and for paranormal investigators. And it's just, like I said, we felt just extremely comfortable. Again, there was moments of being startled, but it was more like a feeling of we want you to know that we're here. If you watch any of our videos, the common phrase that we'll say is, "We want to tell your story. Can we tell your story?" And I believe in that location, they really wanted us to tell their story and wanted us to know that they were there. So it was just a great investigation for us.
So fantastic. And obviously, on the Good Girl Confessional, we're all about telling the story. So that's why I really love that phrase. We want to tell your
Yes.
story. Have
Yeah,
you
exactly.
have you been to a location though where you felt like there was malice, where you were perhaps unnerved?
We find that feeling mostly in some of the prisons that we've gone to. I'd say that the one that really felt the most, what I would call heavy and more dark. I'm not going to say demonic, but more negative was Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, which is in Tennessee. And it's just, when you go into a prison, prisons by their nature were not there to house good people, right? They're there to house the worst of the worst. And so we believe that those spirits that are there were former prisoners. So not so great in life, probably not so great in death. And so there are certain areas in that prison where you can walk in and it's almost like the dark feels darker, if that makes sense. So not so much threatening to us anyway. It never felt threatening, but there were certain areas where we just walked in and said, okay, we're leaving a voice recorder here. We're leaving a night vision video camera here. And that's it. If you want to interact with us, this is the method to do it. Otherwise, we're going to step out of your space and go investigate another cell block or another building. And so that's really how we handle those type of investigations. Before we go into any investigation, we'll say a prayer of protection. And when we're in the investigation, we will make it very clear that any entity is not to hurt us. They're not to leave with us. Unless we say that they can touch us, they're not to provoke us in any way, and we won't provoke them. And that's really how we deal with those type of situations. But to answer your question, there's never been one where I have felt physically threatened. But there are those areas that do feel darker, if you will, when we go into them.
Yeah, wow. I remember being in London a long time ago, but walking sort of through, the areas where Jack the Ripper, say, had
I've done that
been.
tour a couple
Have
times.
you done that tour? And,
Yes, ma'am.
as you walk through that tunnel, which is like bluestone, and I remember them saying, if you want to you touch the walls, you can. And I remember touching the walls, and it's hard to explain it, but it really did feel like this kind of dark, heavy kind of feeling. It was hard to sort of explain.
No, I know exactly what you're speaking of. And that's again, when we go into these locations and we do have that tactile experience with those locations, that's exactly right. When we went to the Villisca Axe Murder House, which is in Iowa, this was a location of a 1912 murder that took place. It was a mass murder in which a family and two small children were killed by an axe murder. That was sitting in the attic. He waited for them to come home and he killed them all with an axe in 1912. And when you walk into that location, it just feels like it's permeated into the walls, right? That energy is just permeated into the walls. And so I know exactly what you're speaking of when you say when you touch the tunnels. That's exactly how some of these locations feel. But to us, it's not threatening like it's going to physically hurt us, but it's more of a there was pain here, there was darkness here, something happened here that wasn't great. So we'll continue to investigate that until we feel that it is threatening to us, in which case we would leave the area.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. And with you talked before about debunking as well. So
Mhm.
sometimes you've been to places. Can you give us a good example of that?
Sure, absolutely. So there's two types of investigations that we do. The first one is what I call the larger commercial locations. So the West Virginia State Penitentiary or the St. Augustine Lighthouse. These are locations that we go into to really do that historical background narrative and put together our portfolio in terms of paranormal investigations. Then the other investigation that we do is private investigations. So houses or businesses where people will call us in and say, can you come and investigate? I think something's going on in my house or my business. So in one instance, we had a gentleman call us and he said, I'm convinced that this new business that I bought is haunted. So he had a business and it's a storefront and it's a glass storefront and it had some display cases that were glass, had some mirrors down the wall, but it was kind of a longer unit rather than wide. It was a longer unit. So he had night vision video cameras set up, security cameras set up around the location. And when he started his business, the night vision video camera kept going on and off. And he said, I'm convinced it's haunted because these are top of the line. They should not be doing this. Something's setting them off they're going off during the night. So can you come and investigate? So we said, sure. We went and we did the investigation. We went there at night and we weren't feeling anything. Our equipment was not alarming or giving any indication that there was anything paranormal in that area. And so I said, what we're going to do is we're going to leave some stationary equipment and we're going to lock up, leave it run by itself for the night, and we'll come back in the morning and see what we captured. So we went back in that the next morning and I was speaking to him and I said, did your cameras go off unexpectedly last night? And he said, yes, they were going off all night. I just can't explain it. I know it's paranormal. So I said, give me the timestamps of when those went off and I'm going to compare them to my cameras. So he did. And so when we were looking through our cameras, what I found was his storefront was positioned on a road that was heavily trafficked by people that made U-turns. So when they made a U-turn on the road, the headlights were flashing into his storefront. They were bouncing off of a mirror and essentially blinding his night vision video cameras, which in essence turned them off and then turned them back on. And so I told him, I think this is what's causing your issues. Change the camera position or take the mirrors down and I think you'll be okay. And he did, and his activity stopped. So for us, that's an example of debunking.
Oh, that's fantastic. Was he happy about that or disappointed, do you think?
A little bit of both. And that's a great question. You're the first to ask that question when I tell that story. Yeah, a little bit of both. I think he was really excited to say that he had a haunted business. But then on the flip side, he was also a little bit nervous about what that would mean. So I think it was kind of a mixed emotion when I said, I don't think you have anything paranormal going on.
And I imagine, though, that a lot of businesses, when you've gone in there and there is, you found definite examples of something going on, paranormal activity, they must be thrilled sometimes, especially in much older sort of locations, because surely that's helpful to their business, or is it a hindrance to their business?
It really depends on what the business is, honestly. A lot of people we've found really embrace it, whether a house or a business. If we find things that we can't explain, and just to be clear, when we do this, we will never categorize it as haunted. We will say that these are things that in this moment we can't explain. If somebody comes behind us and finds a logical explanation for it, that's fantastic. And I want to have that dialogue. But we're saying that in this moment, when we controlled for the things that we can control for, like light or wind or noise, absent that, these are the things that are unexplained to us. And so we will call it compelling unexplained evidence rather than haunted. We will let the business owner or the homeowner call it that if that's what they want to call it. And so most of the time when we do that, when we find compelling unexplainable evidence, they embrace it and they really want to really have that moniker on their business or their house. A lot of people that call us in, they just want to be believed. That they're not going crazy, and really to validate that what their experiences are the things that we can capture as well.
And do you do a lot of work for private homes and individuals?
We do. We've had several call us. A lot of them, there's some of them that will just say, I don't need you to come in, but I took this video. I want you to look at it. Or I took these pictures. Can you help me explain what this is? So we do that consultation as well. Yeah, we've done a few dozen residential and business investigations. So yes.
Wow. And do people tend to stay in the house if they're given sort of some proof that it is really happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talk to them about what it means if we capture something. Again, there's some instances where we can explain it away. Like the light that I mentioned in that one business. So we can explain it away. If we can't, we'll give them options to say, here are your options. You can live with it because you've been living with it. If you feel threatened by it, then we can have somebody come in, a priest or a demonologist, to help you remove that or give you options on how to remove it, because we don't do that. We don't do cleansings or anything like that. That's really not in our wheelhouse. We just do the actual investigation to give them the proof that they're looking for. But we have demonologists or priests that we can call in to bless the house, to sage the house, or to help them remove any spirits that they feel that they might want to remove. But several, like I said, I would say probably a little over half say, okay, we're just cool with this. They've never hurt us. We just kind of wanted validation that we're not going crazy.
Yeah, which is fair enough too, because
Absolutely.
I imagine for most people it's difficult to A, want to believe it,
Mhm.
and B, then it sometimes I'm sure it's difficult to hear, yeah, we did find something,
Mhm.
and you're not going crazy.
Yeah, and it is funny. Most people that when they contact us, it starts out with, "I'm not going crazy, but." So a lot of the conversation starts like that, and we absolutely believe people when they say, because that is their experience, whether or not it's paranormal, they believe that something is going on. So we're absolutely not going to disparage that at all. But we'll go in and try to find the answers for them, which is what we feel our job is.
And how long have you been doing this for? Like, when did this really start? Started back in 2014, was it?
2013 is when,
13.
excuse me, when we investigated at the Moundsville Penitentiary. So
Wow.
we really formalized in 2014.
Wow, that's unbelievable. And so how many places do you think you've probably investigated in that
Uh,
time?
the commercial locations, probably a couple dozen of those,
Wow.
and then probably a couple dozen more residential and private businesses.
And you tend to, so you're pretty much in Florida, is that right? And but you go everywhere around
Yeah.
the US.
Yes, ma'am. So I live in Florida. I'm primarily in Florida, and then we have a couple in Virginia, and then my twin sisters in Southern Florida, and then Kim is in Central Florida.
Wow, okay. And so how long does it take to actually investigate say a property, say, like the grand old lady? Is there a lot of research that goes in prior, and then how long does it take to actually investigate a location?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. So the way we approach our investigations, we do research the location before we go. Really, the historical research aspect of it, to find when it was built, what are some interesting stories behind it. So we spend a lot of time in the archives. We physically go to libraries still. We look through the National Archives, through the state archives to find some historical background of those locations, and then that works for our video as well. So we probably start a couple weeks before our investigation, really doing that historical background research, and then the location really determines how long we stay. So for the Grand Old Lady, we were there for an entire weekend. My twin sister Jenny and I, we investigated a jail last weekend where we also stayed the weekend. Sorry, we stayed for the weekend. So our investigations typically last anywhere from 8 to 24 hours. And so after that, we watch and listen to all of the audio and video footage that we captured. So as I mentioned before, we'll go in and we'll leave stationary cameras. So if I'm in a location for 10 hours and I have 10 video cameras running, that's 100 hours of video that I'm watching. Same thing with the audio. If I've got 10 voice recorders running for 10 hours, I'm listening to 100 hours of audio. And so after our investigation, it usually takes about really a good month for us to go through everything and then produce the videos that we produce.
Wow. So it's quite intensive, isn't it?
It is for us. That's our style. There are other teams that will go in and actually do an investigation, and they'll film it for a live. They'll film it live, like for Facebook or something, and that's their investigation. There's really no going through audio and video. It's just whatever they capture on the live, and that's their investigation, and that's fine. That's their style. That's how that works. But for us, we feel that if we've gone to a location and we've taken the time to go to that location, it would really be a disservice to not listen to everything and not watch everything, because a majority of the evidence that we capture are it comes from those stationary items that we leave. When we were in Fort Mifflin, we set up a voice recorder, a laser grid, and a night vision video camera in what they call a casemate. And this is a subterranean room where they had munitions during the Revolutionary War. So it's about 7 feet underground. It's completely dark, isolated. And during the night, when it was sitting by itself alone and we were on the other side of the fort, we captured a shadow figure that walked from the wall. It walked from the right to the left. It cut off the laser grids as it walked across. And so those are things that we capture on our stationary equipment. So, we would miss that if we didn't go through everything. And so for us, it would really be a disservice if we didn't watch and listen to everything.
Yeah, wow. And when I need to ask, so before you started doing this for a living,
Mhm.
did you believe in ghosts? Like, did you think that it's a possibility that was they were there and it could happen?
Yeah, we've always had that fascination with the paranormal. I'll say up front, I am a Christian. I believe there's an afterlife, but I believe that there's also a stopping point for some between here and whatever's next. That next realm, I'll call it heaven. So I believe that there is, there in some instances where you don't ascend instantaneously. So I've always had that belief. I've always believed that there is an afterlife. I believe that the spirit continues because if we know that we're made up of energy and energy can't be created or destroyed, it has to go somewhere. And for me, there are some that for whatever reason are essentially stuck between here and the next realm. So I've always had that belief, and it's just been I think validated based on the things that we've captured that I absolutely cannot explain.
Wow, yeah. And I like that on your website, and I will put up links for that as well. But on the website, you do talk about again, that you can't categorically say something, that you don't say it's haunted.
Mhm.
All you can do is prove or disprove, I guess, that you found paranormal activity that can't be explained in any other way.
Yes, ma'am. So, for example, when we were at the Exchange Hotel in Gordonsville, Virginia, this was a hotel that was built in the early 1800s, and it functioned as a hotel. But during the Civil War, it was morphed into a Civil War hospital, field hospital. So it saw both Union and Confederate soldiers in this hospital, and over 700 verified deaths occurred in when it was as a hospital. And so when we were investigating there were only 5 females. Again, that was the entire team. There were 5 females on this property. We're the only people in this building. And we captured a child's voice on a voice recorder. There are no children on our team. We captured a child's voice saying, "Hi, this is my bed." And then we captured a male's voice a couple hours later saying, "I don't know. I'll be back at 4:30." And it's crystal clear. There's no mistaking what they say. And that to me is unexplainable. So I'll put that down as unexplainable paranormal evidence because those are things in that moment when I can, again, controlled for everything else. I can't explain that. And again, if somebody comes in the future and says, "Oh, well, I think it's this," then I will, like I said, sit down and have a dialogue with that individual to determine if it's true. But in that moment, in that instance, these are things that I can't explain.
And is it always a thrill when you hear something? I mean, I'm not talking about, when you hear voices, because obviously it's always going to be a thrill when you hear the doors slamming and the things are happening, because you know that something's happening. But is it a bigger thrill to hear voices?
It is. It really is. Voices, footsteps, again, anything that would be germane to the area, but that nothing in the area at the time could cause it. So, for example, we were at Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, and I had a stationary voice recorder on the top of one of the stairwells. And this is a large steel and concrete stairwell. And we were on the other side of the property, and during the night you hear boom 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 as these footsteps come up this stairwell, and that to me is a thrill. It absolutely is. So footsteps, door slams, children laughing, anything like that, it's a thrill. And that's what keeps us listening and watching, because when we're listening to this the audio footage that we capture, 99.9% of the time, all I'm listening to is just static. And it's just, just constant static. But then when I hear a voice come through, it's like, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing this. So I'll mark it and we'll move on to another 10 hours of nothing but static. But to me, it is absolutely a thrill. And I really love doing it.
And do you find that, children, that you talked about, like children laughing, are the spirits of children, do you think, more likely to step forward than the spirits of adults?
It really depends on the location, and that's a great question. And I also think because we're an all female team, we actually approach it with a little bit more empathy than a lot of the other teams that could be in the community today. So, for example, we don't go in with any bravado. We don't go in with chest thumping. We don't go in to try to provoke. We don't say we're not going to believe you're here unless you throw this chair across the room, right? We don't do that. And so when we go to a location where there's a suspected child spirit that is said to be there, we essentially get down on that level. We take toys with us, we take candy with us, we sit on the floor, we lay down on the floor, and we really talk to that child on that child level. And I think we do get responses because we do that. And to that point also, we also take what we call trigger items to all of our locations. So during our research method, or during our research time before the investigation, we will research individuals who are said to have been there or have spent some time there. And we will bring, again, what we call trigger items to try to elicit a response. So for example, when we went to Fort Mifflin, in that where we caught that shadow figure in that casemate, it was used as a solitary confinement cell during the Revolutionary War. And there was a known prisoner named William Howe, and he was hung for treason on the fort grounds. And so we thought to ourselves, what could we take that somebody in solitary confinement would want? So we took water, we took a cigarette, and we took some bread, and we left it in there. And when we go into these locations, we say, this is for you. We acknowledge that you're here. We're leaving these things for you. And if you feel compelled to talk to us or tell us your story, then we're here to listen. And I think because we do that, we do tend to get some very positive responses from that. So for example, during that night at Fort Mifflin, Cara and myself were down in that casemate. We're the only two people in there. And I said, we left you some water. We left you some cigarettes. Very clearly, a male's voice said, thank you. And we captured it on everything that we both heard it in the moment, and everything that we had running in that room captured it. So to me, because we get down on that level, or we present it as, we're here to tell your story, I think we get positive responses because of that.
Wow. Okay. And yeah, wow. So in those, I'd be terrified. I love that you have an adrenaline rush and you love it. And I think it's fantastic that you do, because what you're producing is really incredible, fantastic, interesting stuff. Your videos are terrific.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and taking the time to watch them. So where are you located in
So
Australia?
I'm actually in Melbourne, in Australia.
Love Melbourne.
Yeah,
yes,
I love Melbourne too.
we spent 5 weeks. My twin and I spent 5 weeks down there in 2000, and so it was just an amazing experience. She actually took a couple classes at Melbourne University there. And,
wow, did she?
We did, but through that time, we were also, able to see a lot of the country. We went out to Ayers Rock. We went up to the mountain ranges there, went into Sydney for a few days. So it's just a great country. So we definitely want to come back.
It's radically different to the US, isn't it? It's strange, isn't it? It's like
it is, and I got to say, the first couple of days there, we were like, oh, what have we got ourselves into? And funny story, we saw a Target, and we're like, a Target. We knew a Target. So we knew everything was going to be okay because we found the Target.
We found a Target. I think Australian tourists, everywhere we go, the one thing I think that binds the world is McDonald's. So
yes.
For me, even like being in places like India, I remember getting to India and I was so shell shocked. And then I saw a McDonald's. I was like, what? Like, how can there be a McDonald's in the middle of this, right? Yeah, crazy. But
McDonald's
as you say,
rules the world.
It's those kind of things where you go, oh yeah, yeah. I'll be okay now. Everything's going to be okay.
Yes,
yeah, but that's funny. Target. I love it.
Yeah. The one of the things that just really fascinated us is, we went to the Melbourne Zoo, and we went to some of the other, the zoos and the habitats that are over there. And, here in the US, if you want to see a lion, you've got this glass, then you've got a moat, then there's a fence. And so we went to the Melbourne Zoo, and there's just a chain link fence, and there's a lion. Or there's a koala right there in the tree. It's like, that's totally different.
Yeah, very true. And I think we have this really huge, large kind of elephant, enclosure, if you like, and they sort of just roam around, rather than them being stuck in sort of small spaces. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So
yeah, it is an amazing country. So it's definitely one of those things that we want to get back to. There's several places there that we want to investigate. So
oh yeah,
we'll be there soon, hopefully.
Not sure, but I would definitely, when you're in Melbourne, try, if you get a chance to do it, the old Melbourne jail, which is where our most famous bushranger, Ned Kelly, was hung. And you just have to walk into those cells and you can feel some ominous things going on in the place. It has a pretty brutal history, and well and truly closed down now. but open to tourists. And yeah, quite interesting.
Yeah, there's several investigators because the paranormal community, you really start to know different people. So there's several that I know of down in Australia, and they highly recommend that location. So when we go, we're going to have 3 or 4 lined up, so we can just boom, boom, boom investigate. So I will definitely keep you posted.
Oh, please do! How exciting!
And come with us.
I'd love to.
Oh, perfect. There you go. You're always welcome.
Wonderful. Well, when you come, absolutely invite me, and I would love to do it. Of course, I'll be terrified. You know that, right?
That's okay. That's okay. It sounds terrifying again, but once you get into it and you're sitting there and you just, these spirits can't hurt you.
Yeah.
It's really those people that go in and try to provoke, or they do things like, playing with a Ouija board or something like that have that negative connotation. That's where you really start to kind of get into trouble. But when you go into these locations, it really is all about just the experience. So I think you'll be okay.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm not going to say no, that's for sure.
Perfect. All right.
Wonderful. It's just been a joy talking to you. So
likewise. Thank you, Sandy. Okay. All right. Well, I absolutely appreciate it. And if you want me back anytime, just let me know.
Great. I will. And as I said, when you're here, let me know.
You'll be the first person I call, I promise.
Great. Thank you so much. See you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.